Victoria Hartman lay motionless in the private hospital room, machines breathing for her. The rhythmic beep of the
I'm
heart monitor
scared,
filled the silence.
but I know we'll get through
Tubes
this
snaked
together.
into her
We'll
arms.
face whatever comes
A
our way.
ventilator
You're
covered
not
her
alone.
mouth. The ceiling lights above
You're
cast
gonna be
everything
okay.
in sterile
I'm right
white.
here with you.
I feel so
Her
much
eyes
better with
remained
you here.
closed, her body perfectly still. They thought she was in a coma. The doctors, the nurses, the board members who would visit soon. They were wrong. Victoria heard everything. She felt the sheets against her skin. She sensed the late afternoon sun slanting through the blinds. Her mind ran clear and sharp as it always had, processing, calculating, watching from behind the mask of unconsciousness. 10 days ago, she'd been driving home from the most contentious board meeting of her career. Pacific Coast Highway, Tuesday night, 8:47. The Tesla's dashboard had glowed soft blue, her knuckles tight on the wheel. Marcus Sterling's face kept flashing in her memory. That smile. The one he'd given her when she defended the Nextech acquisition with cold precision. When she laid out exactly why Hartman Technologies needed to spend $2.3 billion to secure their future. Marcus had smiled, not the expression of a man convinced, the expression of a man watching someone walk into a trap. The truck came out of nowhere. Red light blown through, metal met metal, glass exploded into 1,000 diamonds. The world spun, everything went black. Victoria opened her eyes, now alone in the darkness of her hospital room, the machines still humming their mechanical lullaby. 3 days she'd been truly unconscious. Severe head trauma, broken ribs, internal bleeding they'd managed to stop. Then this morning, Friday, she'd surfaced from the dark water of coma into painful clarity. Dr. Elizabeth Monroe had examined her. Pupils responsive, cognitive function intact. A miracle, the doctor said. Full recovery expected with proper rest. The nurse had reached for the phone to call the company to announce the good news. Victoria's hand had moved just slightly, catching the nurse's wrist. "Wait, don't call anyone yet," Dr. Monroe had protested. The board needed to know. The company needed to know. Victoria needed proper care and monitoring now that she was conscious. "Give me 24 hours. I need to think." Something had felt wrong during that board meeting, Marcus's smile. The way Catherine Brennan, the CFO everyone called Kate, had immediately sided with him against the Nextech deal. The nervous glance from Harrison Webb, the newest board member, when Victoria pushed back hard. She'd built Hartman Technologies from a Stanford dorm room 25 years ago. Revenue now at $8.9 billion annually. 12,000 employees worldwide. She controlled 34% of the voting shares. Not enough for unilateral decisions, just enough to make removing her complicated. Unless she was incapacitated, Victoria had spent her entire career assuming the worst about people. It kept her sharp, kept her protected. Trust was a luxury she couldn't afford. Not when every handshake could hide a knife. But now, lying here with everyone thinking she couldn't see or hear them, she had a chance to discover the truth. Who would stay loyal when she no longer held power? Who would move against her the moment they thought she couldn't fight back? Real power isn't when people fear you. It's when they think you've lost power and you finally see their true faces. Dr. Monroe had stood by the bedside, conflicted. Victoria knew the doctor well. 15 years of annual checkups, confidential consultations. Monroe was ethical to a fault. What Victoria was asking bordered on malpractice. "Please, Elizabeth. Something is wrong. I need to see how they react when they think I can't watch them." The doctor's resistance had crumbled when Victoria mentioned the phone calls. The board had already called twice asking about her prognosis. Standard concern for a CEO. Except Marcus Sterling had asked a very specific question. If she woke up, would there be cognitive impairment? Would she be able to resume her duties? That wasn't concern. That was calculation. 4 weeks, Victoria had said. "That's all I need, then I'll wake up officially." Monroe had agreed. The staff was briefed. Patient remains unconscious. Stable but unresponsive. No visitors without doctor approval. Victoria would have her window. Now she waited. Hartman Technologies dominated the AI chip sector. The company Victoria had built on sleepless nights and ruthless decisions. She'd started with nothing but an algorithm and ambition. No family money, no safety net, just her brain and her willingness to outwork everyone else. The tech boom of the early 2000s had been kind to people who could code and didn't need sleep. She'd scaled fast, hired smart, fired faster, built walls between herself and everyone who worked for her. Emotional distance was strategy. Connection was weakness. She'd learned that lesson the hard way 15 years ago when her first startup partners had voted her out of her own company. Tyler and Jennifer, her boyfriend and best friend, they'd held 51% combined. She'd held 49. When the acquisition offer came in, they'd taken it and left her behind. Tyler had looked her in the eye and said it was just business, nothing personal. 6 months later, he married Jennifer. That betrayal had taught Victoria everything she needed to know about trust. Control was survival. Marcus Sterling had joined the Hartman board 4 years ago. Old money, inherited wealth that bought him a seat at tables where he didn't belong. He'd been positioning himself from day one, questioning decisions, suggesting alternative strategies, always couched in language about shareholder value and fiduciary responsibility. But Victoria saw it, the hunger, the ambition. Marcus wanted what she'd built. He thought he could run it better. Kate Brennan was different. Brilliant CFO, genuinely talented with numbers. Victoria had promoted her 3 years ago, but Kate was political. She read power dynamics the way Victoria read balance sheets. Kate would align herself with whoever seemed strongest. Right now, that appeared to be Marcus. Harrison Webb was the wild card. Venture capitalist, joined the board 8 months ago, still finding his footing. Victoria hadn't decided yet whether Harrison was friend or foe. He seemed to respect her, but respect meant nothing when money was at stake. The next tech acquisition was essential. The smaller company held patents on next-generation AI chip architecture. Without those patents, Hartman Technologies would lose market position within 3 years. Competitors were already circling. The $2.3 billion price tag seemed steep. Short-term earnings would take a hit, but the 5-year projection showed 300% ROI. This was strategy, long-term thinking, the kind of decision that separated visionaries from accountants. Marcus saw it differently. Too risky, too expensive. Better to focus on incremental improvements to existing product lines. Safe, predictable, slow death. The Tuesday night board meeting had turned heated. Victoria laid out her case with precision. Data, projections, competitive analysis. Some members nodded, others frowned. Marcus smiled. Then he'd suggested they table the vote for 30 days. Give everyone time to review the numbers more carefully. A reasonable request. Victoria had no grounds to refuse it. She'd left that meeting knowing something had shifted. The accident happened 40 minutes later. Now Victoria lay in her hospital bed listening to footsteps in the corridor outside, voices discussing medication schedules, the elevator chiming as it arrived on the floor. She'd regained enough strength to move her fingers slightly, but she kept perfectly still, training herself to control every micro-expression, every breath measured. The machines reported exactly what she wanted them to report. Patient unconscious, no signs of awareness, no response to stimuli. Sometimes the only way to know who's your friend is to let them think you don't matter anymore. The door to her room opened. Soft footsteps approached, not medical staff. The gate was different, hesitant. Victoria recognized it immediately, even without seeing. Ethan Brooks, her chief of staff, the man who'd worked beside her for 5 years without ever once trying to get close. Ethan stood by her bed without speaking. She could sense him looking at her, taking in the tubes and machines, the stillness of her body. He didn't touch the bed rail or offer empty words of comfort. He just stood there. Finally, he spoke, his voice quiet, almost careful. "I don't know if you can hear me, Tori. The doctors say probably not, but I wanted to talk anyway." Victoria's pulse stayed even. The heart monitor beeped its steady rhythm. She gave no sign. Ethan continued. "The office feels strange without you. People are whispering, making plans, positioning themselves. I've been asked to sign a statement confirming your condition, something the board could use to justify their next moves." I refused. Victoria's attention sharpened. Ethan went on. "They told me I was being difficult. I told them I work for you, not for them." Something shifted in Victoria's chest, a sensation she couldn't quite name. Ethan had always been efficient, professional. She'd hired him 5 years ago because his resume was solid and she needed an assistant who could handle complex scheduling. She'd never thought about what that job meant to him, never considered his motivations beyond the paycheck. I know you don't trust people easily. I understand why. In your position, trust is dangerous. But I want you to know that I've stayed all these years, not just because I need the job, though I do. I stayed because you gave me a chance when no one else would. Victoria's mind raced back, the hiring interview. She'd barely remembered it. 18 minutes. Looked at his resume, asked 3 questions, made an offer. What had been forgettable to her had apparently been life-changing for him. Ethan's voice dropped lower, more personal now. I applied to dozens of companies after my wife died. Every interview ended the same way. They'd see I was a single father and assume I'd be unreliable, distracted, unable to commit. You looked at my resume and hired me on the spot. You never asked about my daughter, never made me feel like my personal life was a problem. You just expected me to do the work. And I did. Victoria had no memory of being particularly kind during that interview. She'd simply needed someone competent, and he'd appeared competent. Efficient hiring, nothing more. But to Ethan, it had meant dignity, respect, a chance to prove himself when everyone else had written him off. I tried to quit once, about a year ago, got an offer from another firm, better hours, less pressure. I told you about it. You looked at me across your desk and said the offer was garbage. You said I was worth more than they were offering. If I wanted better hours, you'd adjust my schedule. You said you didn't have time to train someone new. Victoria remembered that conversation now. Vaguely, she'd been annoyed at the prospect of losing him. Training replacements was tedious. She'd made adjustments to keep him because it was practical, not because she cared, or so she'd thought at the time. I stayed. At the time, I thought it was just about convenience for you. Now I wonder if maybe you actually wanted me to stay. The machines kept beeping. Victoria kept her breathing steady. Ethan's words were cutting through defenses she'd spent decades building. She'd always believed people stayed for what she could offer them: power, money, influence. The idea that someone might stay simply because she'd treated them fairly seemed foreign, naive. Yet here was Ethan speaking to her unconscious body, revealing a loyalty she'd never known existed. I don't know if you'll wake up. The doctors aren't optimistic, but if you can hear me, I want you to know I'm not going anywhere. The board can pressure me all they want. I won't help them take your company. I won't betray your trust. You stood by me when I was a single father nobody wanted to hire. I'll stand by you now. Ethan reached out. His hand briefly touched hers, just light contact before pulling away. I have to go pick up my daughter from school. I'll come back tomorrow. The door clicked shut behind him. Victoria lay in the bed, her mind spinning. Ethan's words had cut through every defense she'd built. She'd always believed that people stayed because of what she could offer them: power, money, access. She'd never considered that someone might stay simply because she'd given them a chance, because she'd treated them fairly when no one else would. She'd hired Ethan because his resume was solid and she needed an assistant. She'd kept him because he was good at his job. The idea that these practical decisions had created genuine loyalty seemed impossible. Yet Ethan was proving her wrong. His loyalty wasn't a calculation, wasn't a strategy. It was simply who he was. For the first time in years, Victoria felt something close to doubt. She'd spent her entire career assuming the worst about people. It kept her sharp, kept her protected. But what if that assumption had also made her blind? What if she'd been so focused on watching for betrayal that she'd missed the people who were actually loyal? The machines around her continued their steady rhythm. The room remained dim and quiet. Victoria knew she couldn't stay like this forever. Eventually, she'd have to wake up, to reclaim her position, to face whatever Marcus and the board had planned. But right now, in this suspended moment, she'd learned something valuable. Ethan Brooks wasn't just an assistant. He was someone who saw her as more than a title, more than a position of power. He saw her as a person who'd given him a chance, and he hadn't forgotten. Victoria made a silent promise to herself. When she woke up, things would be different. Not everything. She'd still run her company with the same precision and control, but she'd pay closer attention to the people who'd earned her trust. She'd stop assuming that loyalty always came with a price. And she'd make sure Ethan Brooks knew his loyalty hadn't gone unnoticed. But first, she had to wait. She'd opened a door by choosing to stay silent. She couldn't close it yet. There were more truths to uncover, more masks to see removed. Marcus was already making moves. Ethan had warned her. She needed to know exactly who was positioning themselves against her before she could act. Victoria remained still. She controlled her breathing, kept her eyes closed, her body unresponsive. She'd built her career on control. Now she'd use that same discipline to see the truth. The accident had taken her power away, at least on the surface. But in losing that power, she'd gained something unexpected: clarity, sight. And when the time came, she'd use both to reclaim everything that was hers. Ethan Brooks drove his aging Honda Civic through San Jose traffic, his mind still back in that hospital room. Lily sat in the booster seat behind him, chattering about her day at school. Something about a science project on butterflies. He made the appropriate noises of interest, but his thoughts kept circling back to Victoria's still form in that bed. He'd meant every word he'd said to her, even knowing she probably couldn't hear him. Maybe especially because she couldn't hear. Some truths were easier to speak into the void. The townhouse he rented sat in a modest neighborhood, 2 bedrooms, small yard. Nothing like the executives' homes in Los Gatos or Palo Alto, but it was clean, safe, close to Lily's school. His parents lived 20 minutes away, retired teachers who helped with childcare when Ethan's work ran late, which was often. 5 years ago, everything had been different. Ethan had worked for a prestigious consulting firm, good salary, partnership track. Then Meredith got sick. Breast cancer. Aggressive. The 18-month battle had drained their savings and Ethan's soul. He'd quit the consulting job to care for her full-time. Lily had been 2 years old, too young to understand why mommy was always tired, why daddy cried in the bathroom late at night. Meredith died on a Tuesday morning in spring. The hospice nurse had been kind. His parents had taken Lily for the day. Ethan sat beside his wife's bed and watched her slip away. 34 years old. Oh, gone. The insurance covered most of the medical bills, but most wasn't all. Ethan had $80,000 in debt, a 2-year-old daughter, and no job. He'd started applying everywhere. His resume was strong, top MBA, 10 years of consulting experience. But every interview hit the same wall the moment they learned he was a single father. How will you manage the travel requirements? Who takes care of your daughter when you are working late? What happens if she gets sick? The questions were never quite illegal, just skeptical enough to make the message clear. Single fathers were risks, complications, liabilities. 32 interviews, 32 polite rejections. Ethan had started to believe he'd never work again, that he'd have to take some entry-level position just to pay the bills, that his career was over at 42. Then Victoria Hartman's assistant had called. Hartman Technologies needed a chief of staff, executive-level position, complex scheduling and project management. The interview was scheduled for the following Tuesday. Ethan had walked into Victoria's corner office expecting another polite rejection. Instead, she'd spent 18 minutes reviewing his resume, asked him 3 questions. Do you have childcare arranged? Can you start Monday? What's your salary requirement? When he tried to explain his situation, she'd cut him off. Your personal life is your business. All I care about is whether you can do the work. Can you? He'd said yes. She'd made an offer on the spot, 15% above what he'd asked for. He'd walked out of her office in a daze, started the following Monday, never looked back. The first 2 years had been intense. Victoria ran her company with precision that left no room for weakness. Every decision carried her signature. Every contract bore her final word. She demanded excellence and fired people who couldn't deliver. But she never once questioned Ethan's commitment when he left early for Lily's school events. Never made him feel guilty about being a father. She simply expected him to manage both. And he did. Year 2 had been the turning point. A competitor leaked false rumors about Hartman Technologies' financial instability. Stock dropped 23% in a single day. The board panicked, wanted to issue an emergency statement admitting to temporary setbacks. Victoria was in Tokyo for negotiations, unreachable for 6 hours. Marcus Sterling had pushed hard for the statement, time-sensitive, necessary for damage control. Ethan, as chief of staff, had the authority to approve it. He'd read the proposed statement, knew Victoria would never say those words. He refused to authorize it. Marcus had threatened to have him fired. Ethan had stood his ground. Fire me if you want. I work for her, not you. When Victoria returned and handled the crisis perfectly, the stock recovered. She never thanked Ethan directly, just said it had been the right call to wait. But the next quarter she'd given him a 15% raise. No explanation, no fanfare, just the number on his paycheck. Ethan had realized then that Victoria showed appreciation through actions, not words. She wasn't warm, wasn't nurturing, but she was fair. And fairness, he'd learned, was rarer than kindness. Now she lay in a hospital bed, unconscious, vulnerable, and Marcus was already making moves. Ethan had overheard the conversation in the parking garage that afternoon. Pure chance. He'd arrived at the hospital early, parked on the lower level, taken the elevator up, then realized he'd forgotten the flowers he'd bought for Victoria's room. Went back down to get them. That's when he'd seen Marcus and Kate standing by Marcus's Bentley, talking in low voices. Ethan had instinctively stepped behind a concrete pillar, some sixth sense telling him this wasn't a conversation he was meant to hear. We have 30 days according to the bylaws. That's our window. Kate's response had been cautious, and if she wakes up before then, Marcus hadn't hesitated. The doctor said severe trauma. Even if she wakes up, she'll need months to recover. By then it's done. Ethan's blood had run cold. They were planning this, actively plotting to remove Victoria while she couldn't defend herself. Kate had raised another concern. Harrison's wavering. He actually likes Victoria. Marcus had sounded confident. Harrison will vote with us when he sees the numbers I'm preparing. Victoria's acquisition strategy is reckless. We'll show the board she's been putting the company at risk. Ethan had waited until they drove away before moving. His hands had been shaking. He'd gone up to Victoria's room and sat beside her bed, wanting to warn her, knowing she couldn't hear, feeling helpless and angry and scared. Marcus Sterling had power, connections, money. Ethan was just a chief of staff, a single father trying to keep his head above water. What could he possibly do against someone like Marcus? But he'd made a promise. Standing there by Victoria's bedside, he would not let them take her company, would not betray her trust. She'd stood by him when no one else would. He'd stand by her now, even if it cost him everything. The machines in Victoria's room hummed through the night. She slept in genuine rest, now her body needing recovery time. But her mind had already made its calculations. Ethan's loyalty was real. Marcus's betrayal was confirmed. The board would vote in 30 days unless she acted first. 30 days to gather evidence, to build her case, to plan her return. When morning came, Victoria would begin her counter-campaign, but she'd do it from this bed, invisible, undetected, watching everything while everyone thought she couldn't see. The accident had taken her power, but it had also given her something more valuable, the truth. And truth, Victoria had learned long ago, was the sharpest weapon of all. She'd built Hartman Technologies on control and strategy. Now she'd use those same tools to defend it. The board thought they had 30 days to remove an unconscious CEO. They were wrong. They had 30 days before she revealed she'd been watching them all along. Listening, learning, preparing. The game had changed. Marcus Sterling just didn't know it yet. Neither did Kate Brennan or the rest of the board members who thought loyalty could be bought or bullied. They'd underestimated her before. Thought she was just a woman who got lucky in tech. She'd proven them wrong by building an empire. Now she'd prove them wrong again. But this time she wouldn't do it alone. Ethan had shown her that loyalty still existed. That some people did the right thing not because it benefited them, but because it was right. She'd spent 15 years believing such people didn't exist. Believing that trust was always a trap waiting to spring. Ethan had just shattered that belief. And in shattering it, he'd given her something she hadn't felt in years. Hope. Victoria Hartman lay in her hospital bed, machines breathing for her, the world thinking her unconscious. But behind closed eyes, her mind was already at work. Planning, calculating, preparing for the fight ahead. She'd lost battles before, been betrayed before, come back stronger every time. This would be no different. Except this time she had an ally she could actually trust. That changed everything. The Friday night stretched into Saturday morning. Dr. Monroe checked on her patient at dawn, adjusting monitors, reviewing charts. Victoria gave no sign of awareness. The doctor marked the file. Patient remains unresponsive. Prognosis guarded. Continue observation. Then Monroe left the room carrying the secret they now shared. 4 weeks. That was the agreement. 4 weeks for Victoria to see who her enemies really were. The stage was set. The players didn't know they were being watched. And Victoria Hartman, lying silent and still, held all the cards they thought she'd lost. Real power, she'd learned tonight, isn't when people fear you. It's when they think you've lost everything and you discover exactly who deserves your trust. She'd built walls so high around herself that she'd stopped seeing the people who actually stood beside her. Now forced into this strange stillness, she could finally see clearly. Ethan Brooks was loyal. Marcus Sterling was not. And in 30 days, everyone would learn what happened when you mistook Victoria Hartman's silence for weakness. The machines beeped their steady rhythm. Morning light crept through the blinds. Victoria waited patient and watchful for the next move in a game only she knew she was playing. Sunday morning arrived with pale light filtering through Victoria's hospital window. Dr. Monroe had smuggled in a laptop the night before hidden beneath medical charts. Victoria waited until the nurse completed rounds before opening it. Her fingers moved slowly, at first testing their strength. 3 days of genuine unconsciousness, followed by 2 days of careful deception, had left her muscles weak. But her mind remained razor sharp. She created an encrypted signal account, added Dr. Monroe first, then hesitated over the second contact. Ethan Brooks, the man who'd proven himself loyal when he thought she'd never know. Revealing the truth to him meant trusting someone. Victoria's instincts screamed against it. Trust had destroyed her once. Tyler and Jennifer's betrayal 15 years ago still burned like acid in her memory. They'd been her co-founders, her boyfriend, her best friend. When the $45 million acquisition offer came, they'd voted her out. 51% beats 49 every time. Tyler had actually looked sad when he explained it was just business. 6 months later, he'd married Jennifer at a vineyard in Napa. Victoria hadn't been invited. That lesson had shaped everything since. Control was survival, vulnerability was suicide. She'd built Hartman Technologies alone specifically so no one could take it from her again. But Ethan was different. She'd heard it in his voice yesterday, seen it in his actions over 5 years. He wasn't positioning for advantage, wasn't calculating angles. He'd refused to sign Marcus's statement even when threatened, had stood in an empty room and made promises to someone he thought couldn't hear. Victoria typed the message, 3 words that would change everything. I'm awake, keep this secret. She hit send before doubt could stop her. Ethan's phone buzzed during Sunday brunch with Lily and his parents. He glanced at the screen. Unknown number. Signal app he barely used. The message made his coffee cup freeze halfway to his mouth. His mother was talking about Lily's upcoming school play. Something about costume requirements. Ethan heard none of it. His vision tunneled on those 3 words. Impossible. The doctor said she was still in a coma, stable but unresponsive. He'd been there yesterday. She'd shown no signs of consciousness. Unless she'd been awake the whole time, listening. The second message arrived while he stared at the first. Come to the hospital. Alone. Tell no one. Ethan made excuses about forgetting important documents at the office. His mother gave him a knowing look, but didn't press. He drove to the hospital, breaking every speed limit. The elevator ride up felt eternal. He pushed open Victoria's door, expecting to find her still unconscious. Some kind of mistake or cruel joke. Victoria's eyes were open. She was sitting up slightly, laptop balanced on her knees. The ventilator had been removed. Her face showed the strain of injury and recovery, but her gaze held all its usual intensity. The relief hit Ethan like a physical blow. He nearly stumbled. Victoria's expression softened fractionally. Close the door. We don't have much time. He obeyed, moving on autopilot. Victoria gestured to the chair beside her bed. Ethan sat. 1,000 questions fought for priority in his brain. She answered the most important one before he could ask. I've been conscious since Friday morning. I chose not to announce it because I needed to see who would stay loyal when they thought I couldn't watch them. Ethan processed this. The implications crystallized quickly. She'd heard him yesterday, every word he'd spoken, thinking she was unconscious. Every private confession. Heat crept up his neck. Victoria continued as if reading his mind. I heard everything you said, about why you stayed, about what this job means to you. I never knew. I should have paid attention, but I didn't. I'm sorry for that. An apology from Victoria Hartman felt like witnessing something forbidden. Ethan found his voice. You don't need to apologize. I never expected you to notice those things. That's the problem. I built walls so high I stopped seeing the people who actually stood beside me. You've been loyal for 5 years, and I never once asked why. The laptop screen glowed between them. Victoria's fingers moved across the keyboard with returning dexterity. I need your help. Tell me everything that's happening at the company, everything Marcus is doing, every conversation you overhear. I'm going to build a case against him, but I can't do it from this bed without eyes and ears on the ground. Ethan leaned forward. The conversation in the parking garage spilled out. Marcus and Kate discussing their 30-day window, the plan to remove Victoria while she recovered, the lobbying of other board members with fabricated concerns about her leadership, Harrison's wavering support. The whole conspiracy laid bare. Victoria's expression hardened as she listened. When Ethan finished, she pulled up financial records on her laptop, pointed to highlighted transactions. Marcus has been short-selling our stock, 50,000 shares since the accident. He's betting against the company while trying to take control of it. That's borderline insider trading. And look at this. She scrolled to another file. Bank records showing a $500,000 payment to Kate Brennan from Tech Venture Capital, a firm heavily invested in quantum systems, Hartman's primary competitor. Kate took money from our rivals last year, never disclosed it to the board. She's been feeding them information, probably why they've been matching our product announcements so quickly. Ethan felt the ground shifting beneath his understanding of the company. He'd known office politics existed, had navigated them carefully for 5 years. But this was different. This was calculated betrayal on a massive scale. What do you need me to do? Victoria outlined her plan. Ethan would continue his normal duties while secretly reporting everything to her. She'd hired a private investigator, former FBI, to conduct surveillance on Marcus and Kate. She'd monitor company emails remotely using her CEO credentials. Build a comprehensive case file. When the board voted in 30 days, she'd have enough evidence to destroy Marcus's credibility and secure her position. But there's risk. If Marcus discovers what we're doing, he'll move against you. He might fire you, might blacklist you from the industry. Are you willing to accept that Ethan thought about Lily, about the mortgage payments and his parents' fixed retirement income, about the $80,000 in debt he'd finally paid off last year? Everything he'd built since Meredith died was fragile, precarious. One wrong move could send it all crashing down. Then he thought about the 32 job interviews where he'd been rejected for being a single father, about Victoria hiring him in 18 minutes because she cared about competence, not complications, about the raise she'd given him after he refused to authorize that statement, about 5 years of being treated like a professional instead of a liability. I'm in. Whatever you need. Victoria studied him for a long moment. Something shifted in her expression. Not quite a smile, more like recognition. Thank you. And Ethan, if things get difficult at home, if Lily needs you more than the company does, you tell me. Some things are more important than corporate wars. The sincerity in her voice caught him off guard. This wasn't the Victoria he'd worked for these past 5 years. Or maybe it was. Maybe he'd just never been allowed to see it before. They spent the next hour coordinating logistics, encrypted messages only, no phone calls that could be traced. Regular check-ins disguised as normal hospital visits. Victoria would maintain her unconscious act for everyone except him and Dr. Monroe. 4 weeks until the board vote. 4 weeks to gather enough ammunition to win. When Ethan finally left the hospital Sunday afternoon, sun had given way to evening shadows. He felt electrified, terrified, more alive than he'd been in months. The game had changed entirely. Victoria wasn't a helpless victim waiting to be replaced. She was a CEO playing chess while everyone else played checkers. Monday morning brought new developments. Marcus scheduled a company-wide meeting to address employee concerns about leadership continuity. Ethan attended, watching from the back of the auditorium. Marcus stood at the podium projecting carefully calibrated concern. The CEO was receiving excellent care. The board was monitoring the situation closely. Business would continue as usual. Hartman Technologies remained strong and stable. Employees nodded, reassured by the steady voice and confident bearing. They didn't see what Ethan saw. The slight smile when Marcus mentioned the board's oversight, the way Kate stood just behind him, Silent support radiating approval. The performance was flawless, almost convinced Ethan himself, and he knew the truth. After the meeting, Marcus pulled Ethan aside. Private office. Door closed. The offer came wrapped in mentorship language. You've served Victoria well, Ethan. That loyalty is admirable. But you need to think about your future. When she recovers, if she recovers, things will be different. The board is concerned about her judgment, about the risks she's been taking with shareholder value. We may need to make difficult decisions. Ethan kept his face neutral. Marcus continued, I want to ensure you're protected regardless of what happens. I'm offering you a promotion. Executive Vice President of Operations, triple your current salary. All you need to do is remain neutral. Don't fight the board's decisions when they come. The money would change everything. Lily's college fund, his parents' medical expenses, security he'd never had. But Ethan had learned something about money during Meredith's illness. It couldn't buy back time, couldn't restore integrity once sold. I appreciate the offer, but I'll wait to hear from Victoria herself about my future. Marcus's smile thinned slightly. Calculation flickered behind his eyes. Loyalty is admirable, Ethan. But think about your daughter. Think about what happens if you're on the losing side when this is over. The threat was delicate, wrapped in concern, but unmistakable. Ethan felt his jaw tighten. I've already lost everything once. I survived. I'll survive this. He left Marcus's office before the anger showed. Texted Victoria immediately. She responded within minutes. He threatened you. I'm sorry, you can back out if this is too much. Ethan's reply was immediate. I told him to go to hell. Politely. Victoria's next message took longer to arrive. You could lose everything, your job, your career. Why risk it? Because I already lost everything when I was a single father and my career had value. I survived. I'll survive this. But I won't survive losing my integrity. The response was brief but carried weight. Ethan felt through the screen. When this is over, things will be different. I promise you that. The week progressed with mounting tension. Marcus released an internal memo Tuesday questioning the wisdom of the Nextech acquisition. Circulated financial projections showing short-term earnings impact. The numbers were real but incomplete. Didn't account for long-term competitive advantage or patent value. Classic manipulation through selective truth. Wednesday brought leaked stories to business press. CEO incapacitated. Company in limbo. Anonymous sources expressed concern about leadership vacuum. Stock price dropped 8%. Shareholders grew nervous. Exactly what Marcus wanted. Thursday afternoon, Ethan's phone rang. Lily's school. The principal's voice was professionally concerned. Mr. Brooks, we need you to come in. There's been an incident. Ethan's stomach dropped. He left work immediately. Found Lily sitting outside the principal's office, tears streaming down her face. A classmate had a bloody nose. The teacher explained in careful language. Lily had punched another student during recess, completely out of character. The girl was normally gentle, sweet, never violent. The principal suggested counseling, asked about stress at home. Ethan signed the necessary forms with hands that wanted to shake. Took Lily home early. His parents met them there, concern etched in their faces. Later after dinner, his mother had cooked after Lily had been sent to her room. Ethan sat on the back porch. His father joined him. They didn't speak for several minutes. Then the older man cleared his throat. She told her grandmother, you're never home anymore. That you leave early and come back late and you're always on your phone. Guilt hit like a hammer. Ethan had been so focused on Victoria's crisis, he'd neglected his own daughter. The one person who actually mattered more than any corporate battle. I'll take some time off. Focus on Lily for a few days. The board vote is next week, isn't it? Ethan looked at his father sharply. The retired teacher smiled without humor. I read the business section. I know what's happening at your company. And I know you. You're going to try to see it through. I have to. Victoria stood by me when no one else would. I can't abandon her now. His father studied him for a long moment. Your mother and I can take Lily for the weekend. Give you time to handle what you need to handle. But after this is done, you need to remember what really matters. Jobs come and go. Daughters only grow up once. The words landed with precision. Ethan nodded, unable to speak around the lump in his throat. Friday morning, he took Lily to the park. Just the two of them. No phone, no work thoughts. They fed ducks at the pond, pushed each other on the swings, ate ice cream despite the morning chill. For 2 hours, Ethan was just a father. Not a chief of staff, not a corporate soldier, just dad. Then Lily asked the question that broke him. "Why are you sad all the time, Daddy?" Her 7-year-old eyes were too perceptive, too knowing. Ethan felt his carefully constructed composure crack. "I'm not sad, sweetie, just busy with work." Lily's lower lip trembled. Mommy used to say work isn't as important as family. Meredith's words from beyond the grave. The reminder of priorities he'd been neglecting. Ethan's vision blurred. The tears came fast and hot. First time he'd cried since her funeral 5 years ago. Lily wrapped her small arms around his neck. "It's okay, Daddy. Don't cry." But Ethan couldn't stop. 5 years of grief and exhaustion and fear poured out on a park bench while his daughter held him. All the nights working late to prove himself. All the anxiety about money and career and being enough for her. The weight of it crushed down until he could barely breathe. When the storm finally passed, Lily wiped his face with her small hands. "I love you, Daddy, even when you're busy." The unconditional acceptance destroyed what remained of his defenses. Ethan held his daughter and made a decision. He would see Victoria's battle through, would help her win because it was right and because she deserved loyalty. But after this was done, after the board vote and the corporate warfare ended, things would change. He'd set boundaries, protect his time with Lily. Remember that success at work meant nothing if he failed at home. That evening, he called Victoria, explained about Lily, about needing to step back for a few days. "Do it. Lily comes first. I mean that. The board vote is in 10 days. If I'm not there supporting you," Victoria cut him off, "then you're being a good father. Which is more important? Take care of your daughter, Ethan. Some things matter more than corporate wars." The certainty in her voice eased something tight in his chest. He spent the weekend with Lily, movies and board games and conversations about feelings. His parents took her Sunday night to give him prep time for the coming week. But Saturday and Sunday, Ethan was fully present, fully there, the way Meredith would have wanted. Meanwhile, Victoria used the quiet weekend to accelerate her physical recovery. Late Saturday night, when nurses had gone home and only skeleton staff remained, she attempted walking. Dermatologist spotted her. The first steps were shaky, muscles protesting after days of stillness. But Victoria pushed through pain like she'd pushed through every obstacle in her life. By Sunday night, she could cross the room without support. Still weak, still limited, but mobile. The private investigator delivered his report Monday morning. Digital files encrypted and password protected. Victoria read through Marcus's activities over the past week. The memo questioning Nextech, the leaked press stories, the lobbying of board members. But one detail stood out. Marcus had scheduled a private meeting with a psychiatrist for Wednesday. The doctor specialized in cognitive assessments, fitness for duty evaluations. Victoria understood immediately. If she woke up before the vote, Marcus planned to claim she wasn't mentally competent, would have an expert ready to testify about PTSD, about cognitive impairment from head trauma, about anything that would keep her from resuming control. She texted Ethan the information. His response came quickly. "He's going to claim you're mentally unfit even if you wake up. We need to prove you're sharper than ever." Victoria smiled grimly at her laptop screen. "Then I'll need to prepare the performance of my life." Tuesday brought an unexpected development. Harrison Webb visited the hospital, thought Victoria was still unconscious, stood by her bed looking conflicted, spoke to himself in the empty room. "Marcus is pushing too hard. Something feels wrong about all this. Victoria built this company, grew it from nothing, and we're going to remove her after one accident doesn't sit right." He left a note on the bedside table before departing. "Get well soon. The company needs you." Victoria waited until he'd gone before reading it. The private investigator had reported Harrison's wavering support, but this felt different, more genuine than political calculation. She took a risk, texted Harrison directly from her personal number. "I'm awake, and I need your help." Her phone rang 10 minutes later. Harrison's voice was careful. "You've been conscious this whole time since Friday the 3rd. I needed to see who would stay loyal when they thought I couldn't watch. There was a long pause. Then Harrison spoke slowly. Marcus has been lobbying me hard. Says you're reckless, that the next tech acquisition will destroy shareholder value. But I've reviewed the numbers. Your analysis is sound. Short-term pain for long-term gain. I understand the strategy. Then why are you wavering? Because I don't want to be on the wrong side when this is over. And I'm not sure which side is right. Victoria appreciated the honesty. Let me ask you something. Did you join this board to protect the status quo or to build something that lasts? Because that's the choice. Marcus wants safe, predictable, slow decline. I'm offering aggressive growth and market dominance. Which future do you want? Harrison was quiet, then a decisive exhale. What do you need from me? Information. Keep attending Marcus's meetings. Tell me what he's planning. And when the vote comes, I need you to table the motion. Buy me time to prepare. If I do this and you lose, Marcus will destroy me. If I lose, he'll destroy both of us. But I don't intend to lose. Harrison agreed, became the third member of Victoria's secret coalition. The odds were shifting. Marcus had 5 votes locked. Victoria now had 3, including her own. 1 more and they'd deadlock the board. 2 more and she'd win outright. Wednesday afternoon brought the development Victoria had been dreading. Rachel called the hospital. Her daughter's voice was tight with controlled emotion. I just saw the news about your accident. Why didn't anyone tell me? Victoria's chest constricted. She'd specifically instructed her assistant not to contact Rachel. The relationship was already strained. Adding guilt about a mother in a coma felt manipulative. But now Rachel knew, and she was coming. I didn't want to worry you. Rachel's laugh was brittle. Right, because we have such a close relationship that my worry would matter. The barb landed precisely where intended. Victoria closed her eyes. When will you arrive? Tomorrow morning. I'm flying out tonight. Rachel, I'm stable. The doctors say I don't care what the doctors say. You're my mother and you were in a coma, and nobody told me. I'm coming. The call ended. Victoria sat in her hospital bed feeling the weight of decades of failed motherhood. Rachel was 25 now. Marketing professional in Seattle, brilliant and independent and deeply angry at the woman who'd given birth to her, then chosen a company over being a parent. Victoria's pregnancy had been unplanned. The father had left the moment she told him. She'd raised Rachel alone while building her first startup, then the second, then Hartman Technologies. Every milestone in her daughter's life had been missed for a board meeting or product launch or crisis management. Birthdays, recitals, graduations, all sacrificed on the altar of success. 6 months ago, they'd had dinner in Seattle. Awkward conversation over expensive food neither of them tasted. Rachel had finally said what she'd probably been holding in for years. You chose your company over me. You always have. I spent my childhood waiting for you to show up, hoping this time would be different. It never was. Victoria had tried to explain. About security, about building something that would provide for them both, about proving women could succeed in tech. Rachel had listened with the patience of someone who'd heard it all before. I had financial security. Mom, what I didn't have was a mother. They hadn't spoken since, except for monthly phone calls that lasted exactly 10 minutes. Polite, distant, the minimum required to maintain the fiction of a relationship. Now Rachel was flying across the country to sit by the bedside of a mother she thought was in a coma. And Victoria would have to lie there and let her daughter grieve. Couldn't reveal the truth without compromising everything. Doctor. Monroe entered the room Thursday evening as Victoria practiced her unconscious act. Your daughter arrives tomorrow morning. I need to know if you're planning to tell her the truth. No, it's too risky. Rachel and I aren't close. She might let something slip without meaning to. So you're going to let her sit here thinking you're dying. The judgment in Monroe's voice stung. Victoria met her doctor's eyes. I'm going to do what I have to do to save my company. After that, I'll work on saving my relationship with my daughter, if it's even possible. Monroe shook her head. I hope you know what you're doing, Victoria, because some things once broken can't be fixed. The words haunted Victoria through the night. She'd spent 15 years building walls to protect herself from betrayal. Those same walls had isolated her from everyone who might have actually cared. Ethan, Rachel, maybe others she'd never noticed. She'd confused loneliness for safety, isolation for control. When this was over, if she won, she'd need to learn how to be human again, how to let people close without fear of the knife. Ethan had started teaching her that lesson. Rachel would be the real test. Friday morning arrived too quickly. Victoria positioned herself in the bed, eyes closed, breathing measured. The door opened at 9:30. Rachel's footsteps were hesitant, softer than Victoria remembered. Her daughter sat in the chair beside the bed, didn't speak for several minutes. Then the words came in a rush. "Mom, I know we haven't talked much. I know I've been angry, but I don't want you to die thinking I hate you. I don't hate you. I just wanted you to see me, to choose me once, just once." Victoria's carefully controlled breathing nearly faltered. Rachel continued, voice breaking. "I'm sorry I wasn't enough to make you slow down. Sorry your company was always more important. But I need you to know that I love you. Even when I'm angry, even when we don't talk, I love you." The tears came then, Rachel crying beside her mother's bed, Victoria lying perfectly still, fighting every instinct to respond, to comfort, to explain. The cruelty of the deception cut both ways. Rachel thought she was pouring her heart out to someone who couldn't hear. Victoria heard every word and couldn't acknowledge any about it. 2 hours Rachel sat there, sometimes crying, sometimes silent, sometimes talking about her life in Seattle, the job she loved, the apartment with a view of the Sound, the man she'd been dating for 6 months that Victoria knew nothing about, all the details of a daughter's life that should have been shared over Sunday dinners and phone calls, instead spilled out in a hospital room to an unconscious mother. When Rachel finally left, promising to return tomorrow, Victoria lay in the crushing silence. Dr. Monroe had been right. Some things once broken couldn't be fixed. She'd sacrificed her relationship with Rachel for Hartman Technologies, missed every moment that mattered. And now, listening to her daughter's grief, Victoria understood the true cost of her choices. Success means nothing if you win the whole world, but lose the people who love you for who you are, not what you've built. The text from Ethan arrived that evening. How did it go with Rachel? Victoria stared at the message, unsure how to answer. Finally typed the truth. "She thinks I'm dying." And I let her think it. "I don't know if she'll ever forgive me." Ethan's response was immediate. "Then you make it right. After tomorrow, after you win, you start over with her. That's what you do. You build things, build that relationship." The simple faith in his words steadied something loose inside her. Ethan believed she could fix this, believed she was capable of change. Maybe he was right. Maybe winning her company back was only the first step. The real work would come after. Learning to be a mother, a friend, a person instead of just a CEO. But first, she had to survive tomorrow. The board vote was scheduled for 10 a.m. 24 hours from now, everything would be decided. Marcus thought he had the votes, thought Victoria was helpless. He was wrong on both counts. She'd been preparing for this confrontation since the moment she'd decided to stay silent, gathering evidence, building allies, recovering her strength. Victoria pulled up the presentation she'd been working on all week. The defense of the Next Tech acquisition, 45 minutes of data and projections and competitive analysis. She'd memorized every word, anticipated every question. When she walked into that boardroom tomorrow, she wouldn't just prove she was conscious. She'd prove she was still the smartest person in the room. The machines beeped their steady rhythm. Friday night stretched towards Saturday morning. Victoria reviewed her files one last time. Ethan had confirmed Marcus's final lobbying push. Kate had circulated her misleading financial analysis. Harrison had successfully remained under the radar as Victoria's ally. The stage was set. The players were positioned. Tomorrow would determine who controlled Hartman Technologies for the next decade. Victoria thought about the woman she'd been 4 weeks ago, driving home from that board meeting, confident in her power, certain of her control. The accident had stripped all that away, forced her to lie helpless and watch the truth emerge. In losing everything she'd gained, something she'd never expected. Clarity about who deserved her trust. Proof that loyalty still existed. Understanding that success meant nothing without connection. The old Victoria would have won tomorrow through dominance and intimidation. The new Victoria would win through evidence and allies and strategic thinking. But more importantly, she'd remember that winning the company was only worthwhile if she had people to share it with. Ethan had taught her that. Rachel's grief had reinforced it. Dr. Monroe's judgment had confirmed it. Tomorrow, Victoria Hartman would reclaim her empire. Then she'd start the harder work of reclaiming her humanity, the company she could rebuild through strategy and determination. Her relationships would require something she'd spent 15 years avoiding: vulnerability, trust, the willingness to let people close enough to hurt her. It terrified her more than any boardroom battle. But Ethan's loyalty and Rachel's tears had shown her the alternative: dying alone and successful, surrounded by things instead of people, respected but never loved. She'd built walls so high she'd stopped seeing the people who stood beside her. Now forced into stillness, she finally saw clearly. Ethan was loyal. Rachel still loved her despite everything. Dr. Monroe cared enough to risk her license. Harrison was willing to bet his career on her vision. These people saw something worth defending, worth believing in, worth risking for. Victoria would prove them right, would justify their faith. And after the dust settled, after Marcus was defeated and the company was secure, she'd do something she'd never done before. She'd let people in, would learn to trust without fear, would choose connection over control, because she'd finally learned what real power meant. Not dominating others, not perfect control, but having people who stood beside you when everything fell apart, who stayed loyal when you had nothing left to offer, who loved you for who you were instead of what you'd built. The Friday night gave way to Saturday dawn, the final day before the confrontation. Victoria spent it preparing both physically and mentally, walking laps in her room when nurses weren't looking, rehearsing her presentation, reviewing evidence one last time. Dr. Monroe helped her dress in the power suit Ethan had brought from her house, applied makeup to hide the lingering signs of injury and recovery. By 9 p.m., Victoria looked like a CEO who'd never lost control, projected strength she didn't quite feel but knew how to perform. The text from Ethan arrived at midnight. Marcus moved the vote up to 10 a.m. tomorrow. He's claiming they have waited long enough. Harrison tried to delay but got overruled. It's happening whether you're ready or not. Victoria's response was immediate. I'm ready. See you in the morning. She lay in the hospital bed one final time. Tomorrow she'd walk out of this room and into that boardroom. Would reveal she'd been conscious for 4 weeks. Would present evidence of Marcus's betrayal. Would defend her vision for the company. Would reclaim everything they'd tried to take. But tonight in the quiet darkness, Victoria allowed herself a moment of doubt. What if she'd miscalculated? What if Marcus had more support than she knew? What if her evidence wasn't enough? She'd risked everything on this gambit. If she lost, she'd lose it all. The company, her reputation, her legacy, everything she'd spent 25 years building. Then she thought about Ethan standing in an empty room making promises to someone he thought couldn't hear. About Rachel crying beside her bed. About Harrison choosing integrity over safety. About Dr. Monroe risking her license. These people had faith in her, believed she was worth fighting for, worth defending. She couldn't let them down. Victoria Hartman had built an empire on sleepless nights and ruthless decisions. Tomorrow she'd defend it with evidence and allies in strategic thinking. But more than that, she'd fight for the people who'd stood beside her when she had nothing left. That was real power. That was worth winning for. Not control or dominance or proving she was right, but honoring the loyalty of people who deserved better than she'd given them. The machines hummed through the night. Victoria slept in genuine rest, knowing tomorrow would change everything. Win or lose, the woman who walked out of this hospital wouldn't be the same person who'd crashed on Pacific Coast Highway 4 weeks ago. The accident had broken more than bones. It had shattered the walls she'd built around herself, forced her to see what she'd been missing, taught her lessons that couldn't be learned any other way. Tomorrow she'd find out if those lessons were enough. Saturday's dawn broke clear over the hospital 6 a.m., arriving with the precision Victoria had demanded from every moment of her career. She examined herself in the bathroom mirror, cataloging damage 4 weeks had left behind. The bruising had faded into sickly yellow patches. New creases framed her mouth. But her gaze remained unwavering, cutting through the reflection with the same intensity that had built a $9 billion empire. Dr. Monroe had appeared carrying the Navy suit like a ceremonial offering. The fabric held memory of countless negotiations, board meetings where Victoria had dismantled opposition with surgical precision, acquisitions closed through sheer force of will. This suit was armor. Today it would serve that purpose again. Dressing required more effort than Victoria wanted to admit. Each movement pulled at ribs still mending. Muscles atrophied from forced stillness protested their revival. But she worked through discomfort with the same ruthless discipline that had carried her through 2 decades of 80-hour weeks. Physical limitations were just another obstacle to overcome through willpower. Monroe applied cosmetics with practiced efficiency, transforming pallor into professional polish, concealing exhaustion beneath calculated layers. When the work finished, Victoria studied the result with critical assessment. Not quite the woman who'd driven away from that board meeting 4 weeks prior. Something in the eyes had shifted. Knowledge gained through deception, understanding earned through enforced helplessness, but convincing enough to project the unshakable confidence they expected. The risk hasn't changed. You could collapse during the meeting. Your body hasn't fully recovered. Victoria's response came without hesitation. Marcus believes he's already won. I need to dismantle that belief before he can fortify his position. Delay means giving him time to prepare counterattacks. Monroe's jaw tightened with professional concern. I've compromised my entire practice for this strategy. If it fails, it won't. Your faith in me won't be misplaced. The conference room waited 1 floor above Victoria's hospital suite, close enough for Marcus to visit afterwards, standing over her supposedly unconscious form with victory fresh on his tongue. Except she wouldn't be unconscious. She'd be standing at the table's head reclaiming authority they'd presumed to steal. Board members began gathering at 9:30. Victoria observed from a supply closet pressed between boxes of gauze and surgical tubing. Undignified surveillance for someone who'd built an empire, but effective. She watched them arrive one by one, reading body language and micro-expressions. Marcus entered first, shoulders squared with premature triumph. Kate followed her CFO precision, evident in measured steps. Harrison appeared looking uncomfortable, conflict plain on his features. Ethan materialized in the hallway at 9:45, spotted Victoria's hiding place, slipped inside without breaking stride. The cramped space forced proximity. Boxes surrounded them. The absurdity would have registered under different circumstances. Marcus has his presentation loaded. Stock decline graphs since your accident. Risk analysis on Nextech showing every worst-case scenario. He's counting votes in his head right now. Thinks he's minutes from total victory. Perfect. Confidence makes people careless. Ethan's expression carried layers. Concern, pride, something approaching awe. I could enter with you. Show unified support from senior leadership. Victoria declined with a slight headshake. You've exposed yourself enough. If this somehow fails, I need you positioned to continue resistance. That requires maintaining plausible deniability. Understanding crossed Ethan's features. He recognized strategy too intimately to argue. Instead, he reached out, fingers finding hers for brief contact. The touch grounded her more than any rehearsed speech. Show them who built this company. Victoria waited until 10 precisely. Marcus's voice carried through the door, calling the emergency session to order. His tone blended sympathy with determination. The performance of a leader forced into difficult decisions by circumstance. He outlined the situation with practiced rhetoric. CEO incapacitated. Leadership vacuum threatening stability. Board's fiduciary obligation to shareholders. All the justifications designed to make removing her seem not just reasonable, but morally necessary. Therefore, I move we temporarily remove Victoria Hartman as CEO and implement interim leadership immediately. We owe our shareholders decisive action. Kate's voice provided instant support, seconding without hesitation. Other voices murmured agreement. The vote would proceed within minutes unless someone intervened. Victoria had timed this moment perfectly, waiting for Marcus to commit completely before destroying his foundation. Ethan made his entrance on cue. Before proceeding with that vote, this board needs to review relevant information. Marcus's irritation sharpened his response. You're chief of staff, not a board member. This doesn't concern you. I have a fiduciary duty to provide material information. The board should know Marcus Sterling has been short-selling company stock throughout Victoria's hospitalization. Chaos erupted, multiple voices demanding explanation, evidence, clarification. Marcus's composure fractured at the edges. Victoria could hear every nuance through the door, the discord she'd orchestrated, the confusion that would make her entrance devastating. Those are false accusations. Show your evidence. Ethan's calm persisted. Your Schwab brokerage account, public records, 50,000 shares sold short over 4 weeks, 2.3 million in profit betting our stock would decline while you orchestrated this leadership crisis. Kate attempted damage control. Board members trade stock routinely. That's not prohibited. Ethan had anticipated this deflection. Trading becomes problematic when you're actively manipulating events to drive prices downward. When you're profiting from inside knowledge about CEO incapacitation, those actions cross into illegal territory. Victoria stepped from the supply closet. Her footfalls measured deliberate. Each step projected authority practiced over 25 years. The conference room door stood ajar. She pushed through. 9 faces turned in synchronized disbelief. Silence crashed over the room like a physical force. Marcus's mouth opened fractionally before training reasserted control. Kate's eyes widened despite professional composure. Harrison visibly struggled not to show relief. Others simply stared, processing the impossible. Victoria crossed to her customary position, placed both palms flat on the polished surface, met each gaze with unblinking intensity. Let them absorb her complete awareness. Total presence. Absolute control. When she spoke, the words carried crystalline clarity. Good morning. My apologies for the delayed arrival. Marcus recovered with impressive speed. Victoria, this is completely inappropriate. You should be under medical supervision. The doctors indicated. The doctors cleared me for this meeting. I've been conscious since day 3. I chose not to announce that fact because I wanted to observe everyone's behavior when they believed I couldn't watch. The implications detonated through the room. Board members exchanged looks, mentally cataloging their actions and words over 4 weeks. Victoria allowed no recovery time. I've monitored every conversation, every email, every strategic move. Marcus, your activities have been particularly illuminating. Shall we discuss what you've accomplished during my supposed incapacitation? Marcus's features hardened into defensive lines. Whatever conspiracy theory you have constructed, I have your short sale transactions. Your leaked statements to financial press containing deliberately misleading information. Your fabricated risk analysis making Nextech appear more dangerous than actual data supports. Emails, phone recordings, transaction records. Would you prefer I present them individually or comprehensively? Color drained from Marcus's complexion. He'd prepared for a vote about an unconscious CEO, not for defending himself against evidence he'd assumed didn't exist. Victoria pressed forward relentlessly. Kate, let's examine your $500,000 payment from Tech Venture Capital. They're heavily invested in quantum systems. Our primary competitor. You accepted $500,000 for undisclosed consulting services and never informed this board or our shareholders. Want to explain what expertise you provided worth that compensation? Kate's professional mask cracked. Fear leaked through the gaps. That payment was properly documented with my tax accountant, with your accountant. Not this board, not the oversight body responsible for evaluating conflicts of interest. You've been feeding confidential information to competitors. That explains Quantum's uncanny ability to match our product announcements. Harrison found his voice decision crystallizing into words. These accusations they substantiated. Victoria gestured toward the door. Dr. Monroe, please join us. The physician entered with measured authority. Her professional bearing provided immediate credibility. She'd been positioned in the hallway for exactly this moment. I'm prepared to provide sworn testimony that Victoria Hartman has maintained full consciousness and cognitive function for 27 days. I've conducted comprehensive neurological evaluations. 0 impairment, 0 trauma-induced dysfunction. She meets every standard for fitness to serve. Marcus tried one final deflection. She's clearly experiencing paranoid delusions from head trauma. This proves exactly why we need to remove her. She's constructing elaborate conspiracy theories, Victoria interrupted with ice in her tone. Dr. Monroe just testified to my cognitive fitness. You're grasping at arguments already dismantled. Let me make this simpler. You and Kate conspired to remove me, crash our stock price, and force acquisition by Quantum Systems. Marcus would receive a Quantum board seat. Kate would become their CFO. You'd both profit enormously while destroying everything I built over 25 years. The other board members processed this revelation, seeing conspiracy laid bare. Harrison stood his movement decisive. I move we table the CEO removal vote pending immediate investigation of these allegations. A second came quickly. The vote passed 7-2. Only Marcus and Kate opposed. Their coalition collapsed like a house built on sand. But Victoria wasn't finished. Defense was insufficient. She'd come to permanently remove threats. I have a counter motion. Remove Marcus Sterling from this board for breach of fiduciary duty. He exploited inside information for personal profit, manipulated fellow board members with falsified data, conspired to damage this company for personal enrichment, all clear violations of his responsibilities. Harrison seconded before Marcus could formulate response. The vote moved swiftly. 7-2, Marcus rose, face flushed with rage and humiliation. This won't stand. I'll challenge it. Legal action. Whatever it takes, security will escort you from the building. Your access to all company systems terminates immediately. Two guards entered on cue. Marcus's exit was swift, undignified. The man who'd counted victory minutes before departing with nothing but rage. Kate watched him leave, horror dawning as she calculated her own position. You're suspended as CFO pending full investigation. If evidence confirms you shared proprietary information with competitors, criminal prosecution will follow. Clear your office today. Kate departed without protest. The boardroom seemed larger without them. Cleaner. Victoria remained standing, unwilling to show any weakness by sitting. One final battle remained. Now we should discuss next tech, since time permits and I'm clearly capable of defending my strategic vision. Her laptop opened to the presentation she'd refined over 3 weeks. Data and analysis and competitive intelligence filled the screen. She walked them through it methodically, addressing every concern raised during previous discussions, demonstrating not just the acquisition's value, but its necessity for survival. Next Tech controls patents essential for next-generation chip architecture. Without those patents, we lose competitive advantage within 36 months. Our competitors are already circling their technology. The $2.3 billion price seems excessive only through a quarterly lens. I plan in decades. This acquisition secures our market position for the next 10 years. Harrison engaged with substantive questions, integration timelines, patent valuation methodologies, competitive landscape analysis. Victoria answered each with precision, having anticipated every objection. When she concluded, thoughtful silence filled the room. Then Harrison spoke with conviction. I move we approve the Next Tech acquisition at the proposed terms. 6 affirmative votes, 1 abstention from a member requesting additional review time, 2 empty seats where Marcus and Kate had sat. Victoria accepted the incomplete victory gracefully. We'll revisit this next quarter after you've completed your analysis. I'm confident you'll support it then. The meeting adjourned. Board members filed out gradually, some congratulating Victoria on recovery, others still processing the morning's revelations. Harrison lingered after the others departed. I want you to understand, I never committed to voting against you. Marcus made compelling arguments, but something felt fundamentally wrong. I'm grateful you're back leading this company. Thank you for tabling that initial motion. It created the opening I needed. Harrison's smile carried relief. I suspected you'd want to orchestrate your own entrance. You didn't disappoint expectations. He left. The room emptied except for Ethan standing near the door where he'd witnessed everything. Victoria finally permitted herself to sit. Her ribcage ached. Her legs trembled from prolonged standing. But victory sang through her bloodstream. Ethan approached slowly, settling into the adjacent chair. You've reclaimed it all. We reclaimed it. You initiated this entire counter-operation. Provided intelligence I needed. Refused Marcus's bribe when accepting would have been safer. Comfortable silence settled between them. 4 weeks of conspiracy and counter-conspiracy, finding resolution. Victoria broke the quiet. I need to understand something. Your loyalty, I never earned it through kindness or special consideration. Why risk everything for someone who never acknowledged your value? Ethan weighed his response carefully. Because you gave me opportunity when everyone else saw only liability. You treated me as a professional rather than a complication requiring accommodation. That respect mattered more than I understood until facing its potential loss. I never realized, should have recognized what those decisions meant to you. Sometimes smallest gestures carry greatest weight. You didn't seek credit for hiring me, didn't expect gratitude for basic fairness. You simply gave me work and expected excellence. That dignity was everything. Victoria felt understanding shift something fundamental in her chest. Loyalty wasn't purchased through grand gestures, wasn't manipulated into existence. Sometimes it grew from simple fairness, from treating people as humans deserving respect. I'm promoting you to Executive Vice President and COO, not as reward, as recognition of work you've been doing for years. Now you'll have title and compensation matching your contributions. Ethan started objecting. Victoria raised a hand. You'll have 2 assistants, flexible scheduling, remote work when Lily needs you. I'm serious about this. Your daughter is your priority. I won't allow work to compromise that again. Emotion flooded Ethan's expression, unguarded and genuine. Victoria looked away, not yet prepared for such raw vulnerability. I learned something during those weeks in that hospital bed. This company means nothing if I lose people who actually care. You cared when you thought I'd never know. That's worth more than any corporate achievement. Dr. Monroe entered, professional demeanor masking visible strain. You've won your battle, Victoria. But I violated ethical principles for you. My medical license could be at serious risk. Victoria met her gaze directly. Name your price, I'll compensate you appropriately for that risk. Monroe shook her head firmly. I don't want compensation. I want you to establish a $5 million cancer research fund in Meredith Brooks's name, Ethan's late wife. The request landed with unexpected emotional force. Victoria glanced at Ethan, saw tears forming, saw recognition of a gesture honoring his wife in ways he'd never anticipated. Consider it done. I'll establish the fund this week. Ethan's voice emerged rough with feeling. Meredith would have appreciated that. She believed success should serve purposes beyond personal gain. The 3 sat in late morning light slanting through conference room windows. Unlikely conspirators. CEO, Chief of Staff, Physician. Bound by secrets they'd carry forward. Victoria felt the weight of what they'd accomplished together. Not just preserving a company, proving loyalty still existed. Demonstrating integrity mattered even when easier paths beckoned. 2 weeks passed in reconstruction. Victoria rebuilt board dynamics with precision, removed threats, strengthened alliances, restructured power so betrayal became more difficult. But she also changed her own patterns. Left office at reasonable hours, declined evening meetings, protected weekends. Small adjustments that would have seemed impossible 4 weeks prior. Ethan's invitation arrived via text. Lily's 8th birthday party, nothing formal, just backyard celebration with family and friends. He phrased it carefully, not as boss to employee, as friend to friend. The terminology still felt foreign. Victoria Hartman didn't maintain friendships, hadn't allowed that vulnerability since Tyler and Jennifer's destruction, but Ethan had somehow bypassed defenses she'd considered impenetrable. Saturday afternoon found her standing in Ethan's modest backyard watching controlled chaos unfold. 20 children ricocheted through an inflatable obstacle course. Parents clustered in conversational groups. Completely alien territory for someone who'd spent 2 decades avoiding anything resembling social obligations. The custom treehouse dominated 1-yard corner. 2 stories of architectural excess, solar panels and rope bridges and built-in sound system. Completely disproportionate for a child's birthday gift. But Victoria had never learned half measures. Lily approached chocolate frosting, decorating her face. Are you my dad's boss? Victoria knelt to eye level, ignoring grass stains her suit would acquire. I'm your dad's friend. He mentions you constantly. He was really scared when you were sick. Your dad is the best man I know that. But he works too much. The 7-year-old's blunt assessment cut straight to truth. Victoria made a decision in that moment. I'm going to ensure he works less, so he can spend more time with you. That's a promise. Lily studied her with childlike seriousness. Pinky promise. Victoria linked pinkies with Ethan's daughter, sealing a commitment that mattered more than quarterly projections. Pinky promise. Later, she and Ethan sat on porch steps while the party continued around them. Parents gathering tired children. Cleanup beginning. Ethan looked more relaxed than Victoria had witnessed in their entire 5-year professional relationship. You didn't need to come. I know social events aren't your comfort zone. I wanted to. I realized I know nothing about your life beyond office walls. That should change. Ethan's expression turned contemplative. I kept separation intentional. Believed you wouldn't respect me if you saw me primarily as a father rather than a professional. Was I really that cold? You were that intensely focused. It built your success, but it also built your isolation. The observation stung with its accuracy. Victoria had confused loneliness for safety, isolation for control, constructed a life where achievement came at connection's cost, only now beginning to calculate the true price. Her phone rang. Rachel's name illuminated the screen. Victoria excused herself, walking to a quieter corner. I saw the news coverage. You're actually okay. Relief saturated Rachel's voice. Victoria's throat constricted. I'm sorry for not revealing I was conscious. You deserve to know the truth. Why the deception? Because I'm terrible at being a mother, at being a person who understands connection, but I'm attempting to learn. Rachel went silent. Then her voice emerged softer. I sat beside your bed pouring out everything I've never said, about feeling invisible, about desperately wanting you to choose me just once. I heard every single word, heard you crying, and I couldn't respond without compromising everything. That was among the hardest things I've ever endured. You actually heard me every word. And you were completely right. I chose my company over you. Missed everything that truly mattered. I can't change history, but I want to try being better, if you'll allow me that chance. The silence stretched painfully. Victoria held her breath, waiting for deserved rejection. Then Rachel spoke words careful but carrying possibility. I've been dating someone. Michael, 6 months now. You don't know anything about him because we never discuss real things. Tell me about him. Rachel did. For 20 minutes, details spilled out. How they'd met, his career, why she loved him. All the information a mother should have possessed months earlier. Victoria listened without interrupting, learning to focus on someone else's life instead of corporate strategy. Can we have dinner? Just the two of us? Rachel hesitated before answering. Okay, but if you cancel for a meeting, I won't cancel, I promise. No meetings, no work, just us. The call concluded with tentative plans for the following week. Victoria stood in Ethan's backyard feeling something unfamiliar, hope mixed with uncertainty. The relationship with Rachel was damaged, might remain damaged, but at least conversation was happening. At least possibility existed. 3 months elapsed. The boardroom had been reconfigured. Marcus and Kate were gone, replaced by tech entrepreneurs who respected Victoria's vision without blind loyalty. Harrison Webb served as board chair. The entire dynamic had fundamentally shifted. The next tech acquisition came for final vote. The previously abstaining member had completed his analysis, now moved to approve. Unanimous passage. Victoria felt satisfaction without triumph. She'd learned distinguishing between the two. Ethan presented operational changes in his COO capacity, spoke with authority born from genuine expertise. Board members posed questions. He answered with earned confidence. Victoria watched with something resembling pride. She'd promoted people before, always based on utility. This felt different. Recognition of someone's worth as both professional and person. After the meeting, they shared office coffee, a new daily ritual, 15 minutes each morning, not discussing work, discussing life. Small talk that had once seemed pointless now felt essential. Lily wants to know if you can attend her school play next month. Victoria checked her calendar. The quarterly earnings call was scheduled that afternoon. Tell her yes. I'll reschedule the earnings call. Ethan's eyebrows rose in surprise. You'll move a quarterly earnings call for a second-grade theatrical production. Some things matter more than investor relations. Lily matters more than quarterly reports. You taught me that lesson. The expression on Ethan's face made rescheduling worthwhile. 6 months had passed since the accident. Victoria stood at her office window, surveying the campus below. 12,000 employees, $9 billion in annual revenue, the empire she'd built through sleepless determination. But now when she looked at those buildings, she saw people instead of productivity metrics, families instead of revenue generators, lives instead of quarterly performance. A photograph sat on her desk. Recent edition. Her Rachel and Lily at Disneyland last month. 3 generations attempting to rebuild connections one careful step at a time. Rachel still maintained some emotional distance, still carried wounds that wouldn't heal quickly, but they'd shared dinner 5 times. Real conversations, beginning to know each other as adults rather than replaying tired mother-daughter scripts. The phone rang, her private investigator following one final thread. You asked for updates on Marcus Sterling. Thought you should know the SEC opened formal investigation, insider trading charges. Harrison Webb filed the complaint with all your documented evidence. Victoria processed this information. Harrison had acted independently, hadn't requested permission or approval, simply did what he believed was right. Did Harrison explain his motivation? Said he wanted to complete what you started, said it was the right thing to do. The call ended. Victoria sat in the office quiet, understanding what had occurred. Her transformation had catalyzed transformation in others. Harrison choosing integrity over safety. Ethan prioritizing fatherhood over career advancement. Even Dr. Monroe making ethical choices benefiting others rather than protecting herself. Real power isn't dominating others or maintaining perfect control. It's inspiring people to become better than they believe possible. Evening light painted the office golden. Victoria's schedule showed dinner with Rachel in 1 hour. A standing weekly commitment. No cancellations permitted. No excuses accepted. Some appointments mattered more than others. Ethan knocked before entering. Smiled, seeing her preparing to leave early. Ready for tomorrow's lunch. Rachel's joining us, right? Victoria confirmed with a bow. The three of them had developed unlikely friendship. Ethan and Rachel bonding over shared experience of Victoria's emotional unavailability, using humor to process what had been painful. Victoria learning to laugh at herself rather than defending every decision. Almost ready, just reflecting on how dramatically everything has changed. Ethan settled into the chair across from her desk. The formality that had once defined their interaction had evaporated, replaced by something easier, more authentic. Any regrets Victoria considered seriously. About nearly losing everything through trying to control everything. About spending 15 years isolated because I feared trusting anyone. About missing my daughter's childhood because I thought success required sacrifice. Countless regrets. But I'm learning to build rather than merely protect. That's genuine growth. That's genuinely terrifying. Building relationships is harder than building companies. Companies follow predictable patterns. People are complicated, messy. They can hurt you. But the alternative is dying alone while successful, surrounded by achievements instead of people. I tried that approach. Didn't particularly enjoy it. Ethan grinned knowingly. Welcome to being human. It's uncomfortable but worthwhile. They walked out together, CEO and COO, friends, headed toward dinner with Rachel. Then weekend plans involving Lily, a life that now balanced professional achievement with personal connection. Victoria had spent 25 years believing you couldn't maintain both. That success demanded isolation. That trust equaled weakness. She'd been wrong about everything. The accident had stripped away her power, forced her into vulnerability she'd spent decades avoiding. In that enforced stillness, she'd finally perceived what mattered. Ethan's loyalty, Rachel's love, Dr. Monroe's integrity, Harrison's courage. These people had stood beside her when she possessed nothing left to offer, when power and position had vanished. They'd proven connection was strength. That trust carefully extended could be rewarded. That vulnerability wasn't weakness, but foundation for everything worth having. Marcus and Kate had wagered on her isolation. Assumed no one would defend her. They'd miscalculated catastrophically. Because Victoria had spent 4 weeks learning a lesson she'd resisted for 15 years. You didn't build an empire worth having by standing alone. You built it with people willing to fight beside you. People who saw you at your lowest and chose to lift you up. People who believed in you for who you were rather than what you controlled. Victoria Hartman walked out of Hartman Technologies headquarters into Saturday evening, her company secure, her position restored, her enemies defeated, but more importantly, walking toward dinner with her daughter, toward friendship with people who'd earned her trust, toward a life-balancing achievement with connection. The woman who'd crashed on Pacific Coast Highway would have called this weakness. The woman who'd lain in that hospital bed learning uncomfortable truths knew better. She'd won her company back. Now came the harder victory. Learning to be fully human, to let people close without paralyzing fear, to build relationships alongside empires. The boardroom battles were simple compared to this, but as Ethan had observed, uncomfortable could also be worthwhile. Victoria was finally ready to discover that truth. The evening stretched ahead with promise rather than emptiness. Rachel waited at the restaurant. Lily's school play next week. Coffee with Ethan Monday morning. Small moments accumulating into something larger than quarterly projections or market dominance. A life rather than merely a career. Connection rather than control. People rather than power. Real success wasn't measured in billions or market share. It was measured in who stood beside you when everything collapsed, who remained loyal when you possessed nothing left, who loved you for who you were rather than what you'd built. Victoria had finally learned to count what actually mattered. She'd built walls so high she'd stopped seeing people who stood beside her. The accident had demolished those walls, forced her to see clearly. Now she was learning to live without them, to trust carefully but genuinely, to let people in, to choose connection over safety. It still terrified her, probably always would. But terror was preferable to the alternative, preferable to dying alone, preferable to success without meaning, preferable to power without purpose. Victoria drove through Silicon Valley toward dinner with Rachel, her phone silent, her schedule clear, her attention fully on the evening ahead. The company would still exist Monday. The deals and decisions and strategic planning could wait. Tonight was for rebuilding what mattered most. Tonight was for being a mother, a friend, a person who'd finally learned that you could win the entire world and still lose everything that made winning worthwhile. She'd come dangerously close to that fate. Now she was choosing differently, building differently, living differently. The restaurant appeared ahead, Rachel's car already parked. Victoria pulled in beside it, took a steadying breath, stepped out into her reconstructed life, the one where relationships mattered as much as revenue, where trust was rewarded rather than punished, where vulnerability was strength rather than weakness. She was still learning, still making mistakes, still terrified of being hurt. But she was trying. That had to count for something. Inside, Rachel waved from a corner booth. Victoria crossed the restaurant feeling lighter than she had in years, ready to listen rather than lecture, to connect rather than control, to be present rather than perfect. The accident had broken more than bones. It had shattered the prison she'd constructed around herself, forced her into painful growth, taught her lessons that couldn't be learned any other way. She slid into the booth across from her daughter, smiled genuinely. "Tell me about your week." And Rachel did, discussing work and Michael and apartment hunting and 1,000 small details comprising a life. Victoria listened, truly listened, learning to care about things that didn't affect her company, learning to value her daughter's happiness over her own comfort, learning to be the mother she'd never quite managed to be. This was harder than any boardroom confrontation, required more courage than facing Marcus, demanded vulnerability she'd spent 15 years avoiding. But it was also real in ways corporate victories never were. This mattered. This was worth the discomfort. This was what she'd been missing while chasing power and control and perfect safety. The evening unfolded with easy conversation, plans for the following week, stories about Michael's family, Rachel's promotion at work, all the sharing that should have happened for years but was only now becoming possible. Victoria contributed her own stories about Ethan and Lily, about learning to delegate, about discovering that letting people in didn't destroy you. Sometimes it saved you. When they finally left the restaurant, Rachel hugged her, brief but genuine, progress measured in small gestures. Victoria held on slightly longer than necessary, grateful for the chance to try again, to build something real with her daughter, to prove people could change, that relationships could be repaired, that it was never too late to choose connection over control. Driving home through Saturday night traffic, Victoria reflected on the journey. 4 weeks of chosen unconsciousness. 4 weeks watching people's true nature emerge. 4 weeks that had changed everything. She'd lost power, gained clarity, lost control, gained trust. Lost isolation, gained connection. The trade was worth it, would always be worth it. She'd built an empire on sleepless nights and ruthless decisions. Now she was learning to build a life on vulnerability and trust in carefully chosen relationships. Both required discipline. Both demanded sacrifice. But only one left you with people who mattered when everything else fell away. Victoria Hartman pulled into her driveway, her house dark and quiet. But Monday would bring coffee with Ethan, Tuesday dinner with Rachel, Wednesday Lily's school play, a calendar full of commitments mattering more than quarterly projections, a life instead of merely achievements, connection instead of isolation. People who chose to stay because of who she was, not what she controlled. The woman who'd crashed 4 months ago would have seen this as weakness. The woman stepping from her car knew better. This was strength, real strength, the kind that came from letting people see you vulnerable and choosing to stay anyway, from trusting carefully but genuinely, from building relationships alongside empires, from remembering that success meant nothing if you won everything and lost everyone. She'd learned her lesson, paid the price for transformation. Now came the work of living differently, of choosing connection over control every single day, of building a life worth having instead of just a company worth billions. It would be uncomfortable, terrifying, worth every moment of discomfort, because dying alone and successful was no longer an option, because she'd finally discovered what real power meant, and it had nothing to do with domination or control or perfect safety. It had everything to do with people who stood beside you when you possessed nothing left, who remained loyal when you couldn't watch them, who loved you for who you were rather than what you'd built. Victoria walked into her house, ready for Monday, ready for connection, ready for the harder victory of building relationships. The company was secure. The real work was just beginning.